Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, The Whole Bowl You Say. Tonight I was making dinner with my full of attitude preteen. PT. While I was preoccupied with the hot stuff on the stove, I had her ribbon the zucchini, which she did and placed into a little prep bowl. Having completed this task, I moved on to another task and instructed her to put the zucchini in the pan. PT, how much? A tiny bit annoyed by this question. Why would I make her cut a whole zucchini if we weren't going to use it all? I answered without turning, and my tone was a bit exasperated. Oh, the whole bowl. Well. I turned back to the pan, to find the prep bowl, full of zucchini, placed precisely in the middle of the pan. Her little giggle of glee at her own malicious compliance was adorable, and we had a cute little mum-daughter moment. The next story is titled, My Little Sister's First Malicious Compliance. This happened a few days ago. We got a new puppy and me, 17 meters, and my sister, 10, wanted to brush his fur, so she asked for the dog brush my dad had for his dog. It was covered in old fur and whatever else. So my sister politely asked him to wash it for her. My dad not only refused but also said since I was sitting around doing nothing I should do it. Totally okay. Then a few moments later, for some reason, my sister splashed some water at my dad playfully. Like a few drops, I swear. My dad was washing his hands and had foam from soap on his hands, so he shook his hand on purpose and some soap went in my sister's eye. She was pissed. For one, my dad didn't do it playfully. He was scolding her. IDKY, maybe he got irritated. So my sister in turn took 2 shirt hangers she brought outside for him to dry his shirt and kept it inside. Silly and petty, I know, but she's a kid. My dad goes full Kevin mode, scolding her. In between he called her ungrateful. My sister is a very sensitive girl and gets her feelings hurt pretty quickly. Also, she's the kind of girl that goes out of her way to help people. So she is in no way ungrateful. So she was pretty upset for a few minutes. Cue the malicious compliance. Because my dad called her ungrateful for not helping, she decided she may as well be ungrateful. She stopped helping him even a little bit. She has a lot of qualities from all over my family, like my dad's determination when he's up to some task, my stubbornness, not exactly a prized trait, and my mum's helpfulness. Hunger Games reference. It just popped up in my head while typing, and it's true. After 2 days she has my dad literally begging her to start behaving like before. He could feel the cold vibe whenever she talked to him. She's one of the sweetest kids I know, and I love her even more now. The next story is titled, Stepdad Said Do All the Laundry. Background, I'm 16 and my parents aren't together. They were never married, and they had me young, so they never went to court or anything for a custody agreement. I stay at my mum's most of the time and can go to my dad's pretty much whenever I want. Last night, I asked my mum if I could go to my dad's, and she said I could as long as I completed a list of chores. I did most of them last night, leaving only a few things to be done this morning. I woke up around 9:30 a.m., got out of bed, and got ready to go on my daily bike ride. But when I went into the kitchen, there was a piece of paper with big red Sharpie written on it. It was from my stepdad, telling my stepsister to do the dishes, and telling me to do a huge list of things before I went to my dad's. Vacuum the whole house, dust the whole house, wash my sheets, make my beds, bunk beds, wash the towels, fold the sheets on the table, etc. But, at the bottom of the note, separated from both my sister and I's names, there was a line that read, "If there's any laundry, do it." Oh, okay then. If there's any laundry. We live in a small ranch house with barely enough room for all of us. My mum and stepdad's room are actually meant to be an office. They have dressers crammed in there, but their clothes always end up on the floor or on the floor of the makeshift closet they have set up in what's supposed to be the dining room. We just have bookshelves and the family computer in there. So, I trudged through the house and got any and all clothes that were on the ground and threw them in the washer. You may be wondering, how is this a bad thing? Isn't that helping them? You'd think so, right? Well, remember that line of, fold any clothes on the table? Yeah, well, the table got full of towels pretty fast. So, all their clean clothes were thrown onto their bed, and I swear the pile almost reached the ceiling. My stepdad's face when he came home from work and had to fold a mountain of clothes to go to bed tonight was priceless. The next story is titled, Must Fax Us to Get Return Authorization Code, OK. In my early 20s after being a team lead I took over as a shipper-receiver for a big box store. I took care of receiving merchandise from the warehouse and processing returned merchandise to manufacturers for credit. Most business-to-business returns requires authorization. So, I as the receiver contact the manufacturer with information about the returned item, why it was returned, and the manufacturer gives me an authorization number and shipping confirmation to return the item. Each place has different guiding setup and they constantly change. Well, I took over the shipper-receiver job after the last one quit. I inherited a massive stock of unprocessed damaged returns. I start chiseling away at this pile and I come across these hard drives that have been sitting for months and they keep piling up with notes of no response when faxed for return authorization. I check through the paperwork and I call the company person on the phone is rude with me and tells me they only accept fax request for return authorization. I tried explaining according to our records there has been no response. They tell me again to use the fax number and hang up on me. Okay, maybe the previous shipper-receiver missed the responses, didn't work the fax machine right or whatever. So, I fax and wait. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, nothing. I fax again, 1 day, nothing. I try calling rude person tells me to only fax. Okay, so I fax once a day now, a week goes by, nothing. Now I'm getting angry and getting tired of seeing those returns. So, after that week, I walk in AD every hour. On the hour I send 2 faxes. About 4 hours into my shift I get a call. It is from the company I've been trying to get a hold of. Them, can you stop faxing us please? Me, can you give me a return authorization number for these items please? My store has been trying to get this authorization for months. Them, well you have to call this number 555BS more BS. Me, interesting because when I call I am told I can only fax this number for return authorization and according to the documentation from your company it says to fax this number for return authorization. So, which is it? Them, hold on, they come back, give me authorization to finally return the items and then say, in the future if you are having issues with returns don't overload our fax machine. Me, you do know the best way to avoid this don't you? No, I didn't stay long in that position and didn't care if my attitude showed. At that point they were preventing me from completing my task and was tired of their crap. The next story is titled, Medical Care Provided by the Garage Man. I finished my PhD in the middle of a terrible recession, and I was having a hard time finding a permanent job. I stayed afloat financially by adjunct teaching, low pay, no benefits, and by doing whatever odd jobs I could find. I was a volunteer EMT at the time, and a friend was able to get me a night shift job in a local hospital as an IV technician. Strictly speaking, that should have been a job for licensed nurses, so I suspect the hospital was violating some laws by having EMTs do that, but we were very cheap labor. The nursing staff made it abundantly clear they thought the EMTs were uneducated halfwits, too suggested that I try to get an associate's degree to better myself, and that we were utterly beneath contempt. We were completely at the mercy of the charge nurses, and all they ever wanted us to do was take out the garbage and clean up patients after their diapers had exploded. Me, how did you manage to get it on the ceiling? Contrary to what the job description implied, it was actually very rare for us to be asked to start an IV line on anyone, and even then it was usually for combative or belligerent patients. One time I was asked to start a line on a woman, and the second I stepped in the door she bellowed, "I only want someone who does it professionally." I had enough practice with that sort of thing from my volunteer work that I could have threaded a needle on a roller coaster ride, and I calmly assured her I could manage it without difficulty. Reluctantly, she let me take her hand and I was able to get the line in quickly and painlessly. As soon as I returned to the nursing station the charge nurse snarled at me, "Empty the garbage from the patient rooms." I asked if I could at least wait until the patients were asleep so the patient I just started the line on wouldn't erupt, but she wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. So, I did exactly as I was asked. Predictably, the woman I had just started the line on saw me with the trash bin and she started screaming. They had the garbage man start my IV. What kind of a hospital is this? Postscript, as the early morning approached I went to the lobby where the janitorial staff was gathering. I quickly picked up on the fact that they all had chips on their shoulders, and they felt like they were being treated like lower life forms. And from my own experiences, I knew they were absolutely right. So to this day I make a point of being absolutely respectful of everyone, know how lowly of a job they seem to have, and to help them out if I can. That has actually paid off a lot of unexpected dividends, as the janitors have proven to have the most accurate gossip network. It seems the executives think the janitors are invisible, and the execs say a lot of sensitive things when they're around. And my corporate spies just love passing the information to me. The next story is titled, Paranoid and Abusive Customer Swallows His Own Medicine. I used to work as junior admin for a medium-sized web hosting company. The actual job title went a little bit different, but junior admin is essentially what the work amounted to. The team I worked for is a sort of white gloves, premium managed hosting service with a fairly steep monthly cost, intended to provide hosting support to mostly medium businesses that were paying for fairly high-powered VPS or dedicated servers, or several. On my first day on the team, I had my first interaction with one of our regular callers we'll just call Dan. Dan is extremely paranoid about his server security, and virtually everything running on his server is completely customized with third-party software we do not provide support for. I later found out that everyone else on the team intentionally avoided picking up Dan's chats, and letting me walk into that interaction with Dan blindly was a sort of welcome to the team hazing ritual. When you initiate a support contact, be it via support ticket, chat or phone, you have to provide either a password, pre-generated access hash or passphrase set up by the account owner before providing support and disclosing potentially sensitive customer information. Any one of these three methods would serve to verify account ownership and allow full access to the account, including making additional purchases, canceling services and pretty much anything else. This was not secure enough for Dan. Dan insisted that before any support is rendered, two of these methods have to be provided. As company policy only calls for one, Dan's preferences were simply annotated as a sticky note on the account, which is easy to miss. In my first interaction with Dan, he voluntarily provided only one of the verification methods, and after verifying it checks out, I began addressing his support issue. Dan flies off the handle and loses his $% because I did not prompt him for a second verification method, and launches into a really long and drawn-out lecture on keeping his account secure. He eventually calmed down enough to let me do my job and provide him with support. Fast forward a few months and more than a few additional interactions with Dan, raising support tickets for asinine questions like, who owns this IP address that shows as having been blocked in my firewall logs? I demand a full security sweep of my server to make sure it wasn't compromised. I see that Dan shows up as waiting in the chat queue and groan to myself. The only other admin that worked that night was on lunch, and I was scheduled to go on lunch right as he gets back. Not only is interacting with Dan a complete nightmare, he also takes forever to get to the point, and it looked like lunch wasn't going to happen anytime soon. I accept the chat. The user provides the first verification method, and dutifully I asked for a second verification method, not about to be yelled at a second time by Dan. The second verification method checks out too. I ask how I can help, and the person on the other end goes, "This isn't Dan, I'm his developer. Dan hasn't paid me for my work, so I want you to delete everything on the server." Working in this industry, I've come in contact with more than a few attempts of social engineering, and was completely taken aback by this guy's candor. He clearly knew our company policies and knew that as long as the caller was able to verify the account and provide the necessary credentials, we would be forced to comply with their request. I quickly performed an external backup of all of Dan's files. The person on chat did not ask me to delete backups, nor did he ask me not to take any, and deleted all of the site files, effectively taking down Dan's website. I will admit that this felt extremely satisfying, and taking a backup of Dan's stuff was a courtesy that I did not have to perform, given the circumstances, but knew my life would not be made easier if I hadn't done so. 20 minutes go by and I'm keeping my eye on the queue, entirely forgetting about lunch at this point. I knew Dan would call any minute now, and that I would not be able to dodge his calls at this point. Sure enough, Dan's call, no chat this time, comes in. From the moment I pick up the phone, Dan is screaming in my ear about getting hacked and how insecure our infrastructure was. It takes another 10 minutes for him to calm down enough to provide both methods of verification. Before verification, I was not able to provide any account information as per policy. Once he was verified, he demanded to know what happened to his website, and with a calm I didn't really feel, I told him, "That was me, I deleted your site, Dan." Your developer started a chat and was able to provide both of the verification methods on your account, confirming account ownership. As per policy, this provides him with full access rights and we are obligated to comply with the requests. This is not the kind of access a security-minded individual such as yourself should have given out to a developer you stiffed on his bill. I told him that I slightly bent the rules for him and took a completely random courtesy backup of his files right before the request to delete the site files came in. Few minutes later, I've got Dan's site back up and running. No idea if he ever ended up paying his developer, but we changed his access credentials and passphrase at the end of the call and Dan became a lot easier to work with from that day forth. The next story is titled, Don't Add Seasoning? Okay. A few notes. I've always had a rough relationship with my mother and she and I also see very differently when it comes to seasoning food. My dad is St. Lucian and he taught my brothers and I to season food like our lives depends on it. My mother on the other hand slaps chicken onto a pan and throws it into the oven and then yells at us when we try to season it. I have been vegetarian since I was in 6th grade and I just graduated high school and I still cringe when I see her cook. We never eat as a family. I love mashed potatoes and I love potatoes in general. They can make anything and everything and they're yummy. I was craving some mashed potatoes 2 days ago and decided to make enough of the box kind for my entire family. While I was mixing the ingredients together and went to grab for the salt, my mother yelled at me saying it's already pre-seasoned. I tried to explain to her that this is the one you add the seasoning yourself and not the lightly salted one. Mind you, she complained that one had too much seasoning still. She told me to not add seasoning or don't make it. So I made it. No seasoning, nothing. Didn't add my homemade seasoning, no salt, no pepper, nada. I finished it, put the amount I wanted in the bowl, snuck in all the seasoning I wanted before telling everyone there's mashed potatoes on the counter. She's the first one out and I'm sitting at the table waiting. She puts a bunch on her plate and grabbed a spoonful. She has this face of pure confusion. She asked me which box I used and I told her the unseasoned one. She then asks why I didn't add a little bit of salt. I told her that she told me not to add seasoning or I couldn't make it. She didn't really give a response and added a bit of salt and walked back into her room to eat. I found it super satisfying, but it's not as extravagant or as explosive as others, so I'm sorry about that. The next story is titled, Teamwork Makes the Dream Work. Malicious compliance with a tag team from the manager. Basically, I work in a call center for a fairly large not-for-profit. We get calls all the time from department collectors looking for people and normally the interaction below plays out in which we politely tell them to duck off. DC, can I speak to X? Me, what is it regards to? DC, it's a personal business matter. Translation, they owe us money, they almost always say this. Me, sorry, regardless of whether X is with us or not, we have a policy of not getting involved in personal business matters. I will be unable to transfer your call or leave a message. Anything else I can help with? DC, no, that will be all. End call. However, sometimes they do try to push back. And our rule here is simply, if they push, don't move. And we are more than happy to comply, management included. DC, hello, can I speak with X? Me, what is it in regards to? DC, doesn't matter, are they there or not? Me, if you are unable to tell me what it is in regards to, sir, I am unable to assist you any further. DC, is there anyone else I can talk to? Me, not unless you can tell me the purpose of your call, sir. DC, alright, well then give me your manager so I can talk to them about your attitude. Me, certainly sir, please hold the line. I call my manager over and tell them there is a complaint about me. Manager, hello, this is why I'm me's manager. How can I help you? DC, your staff member has been incredibly rude and unhelpful. I'm shocked at how poorly you are training your staff. Manager, my apologies for that, sir. I will be sure to have a word with him after this call. May I help with your initial inquiry? DC, yes please. Can I speak with X? Manager, now realizing what this is. What is it in regards to? DC, as I said before. That doesn't matter. Now are you going to do your job and put me through or not? Manager, I'm going to do my job and not. Is there anything else we can help with? DC, click. Manager, out loud to no one in particular after carefully putting down the receiver, well duck you too, buddy. Moral of the story: don't try to intimidate call center staff, it really just doesn't work and you just end up with a recording of you being a jackass. The next story is titled, God Works in Mysterious Ways. Not my story but one about my great-aunt Nellie from the 60s. She lived on a rural farm where the main water supply for the farmhouse was tanked water that was collected from its roof. As she tells it, they had a bit of a dry spell. It must have been a major drought because they had about 15,000 gallons of water storage. Nellie idioted to nag my great-uncle George about getting a water tanker delivery to partially fill the tank storage, but he kept on saying that it would rain soon and it was a waste of money to pay for water when God would provide it for free. Came the evening when the water ran out. They had just enough water in the kettle for breakfast and the morning tea. George was cold, so he used most of the water in the kettle to make himself a hot water bottle. In the morning, George came down for breakfast and said that his tea and the porridge tasted funny. Nellie then told him that she had made his porridge and tea with the water from his hot water bottle. Her tea was fine, she used the rest of the water in the kettle to make that and she had toast for breakfast. The water tanker delivered 4,000 gallons that morning and God filled the rest of the tank storage the next week. The next story is titled, Delivery Driver Can't Park on Your Driveway. To explain, I work for a national wine retailer mainly as a delivery driver. We offer free delivery straight to your door when you order from our store. In the before times, this meant maybe 10 deliveries every few days to our local encatchment as most people purchased in store. However, because we have been shut to customers for the last few months, it means between 30 to 40 deliveries per day, 6 days a week. On to the customer, let's call her Susan. Susan orders regularly, a bit too regularly, and has made it abundantly clear to both our drivers, our store manager, our customer service team and HQ, that we are unequivocally not allowed to maneuver onto her driveway during deliveries. Her house is at the end of a cul-de-sac with a driveway technically shared between 5 houses as a sort of branching design, so it's quite away from the main road. I had the pleasure of delivering during a particularly stormy day. The wind was driving the rain sideways, instant flash flooding across the county. I was piss wet through after the first stop, and this was now only number 24 of 39. I was already not a happy bunny when reading the next address. My heart sank as I realized I would be carrying large crates of beer and boxes of wine by hand roughly 30 meters to Susan's front door, about 7 relays in total. Rolling up to said address, my head went duck it, and I reversed the van all the way to Susan's house. Braced myself against the seat to open my door into what, I can only imagine, a lonely sock feels like inside a washing machine. My glasses were instantly blown from my face, and as I scrambled to find them in the rising inches of water, I hear a scream from above. Terrified that some poor person had been gusted into the upper atmosphere, I whip around to see Susan, protected by an umbrella, leaning out of her bedroom window shrieking at me to get my van off her property. I shout back that I have a delivery for her, my words snatched away by the wind, and point to the logo on the van, but to no avail. Susan continues her harpy-like crescendo. Fine, I think to myself, if I can't park on your driveway, you can come and pick up your booze from the road. I give Susan a sarcastic salute, jump in the van and park back on the main road. Content: Susan meanders her substantial mass down to her front door and opens the porch in anticipation. While staring dead at her, I open the back doors of the van and begin neatly stacking her boxes on the road in the biggest puddle I could reach. Susan explodes at me. Though through the gale force wind I can't hear the particular words of abuse she's screeching. I give a cheery wave, hop back in the van and wheels spin off, heart pounding like my bungee cord had just snapped mid-jump. The rest of the day is going wetly and I get a phone call from my manager. Susan has called in to file a complaint against me, ordered that I be fired, and called me a bunch of highly offensive and derogatory names, as well as insulting the wider company and questioning the effectiveness of female delivery drivers, to my female manager. She was so offensive that my manager couldn't get out of her what the actual problem was, and ended the rage dial by calmly explaining to Susan that she is no longer a customer with us and to never contact us again. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.